Welcome to the Eclipse OpenJ9 community call for October 26. As always, please add your name and affiliation to the list of people attending, just so we have some idea of who's been attending the calls. And I'll pause here. We have our agenda, but if there's something anyone would like to add to the agenda, please chime in now. If something comes up along the way, feel free to add it into the any other business section as well, and we can tackle it then too. So we don't have a lightning talk scheduled this week. So if you do have a lightning talk that you'd like to give, please reach out to me. We'll get them all scheduled in. You can do that now, or you can find me on Slack and we'll get that worked out. Take a quick look at the recent end user issues. There's been a couple that have come in the last since the last meeting. Looks like there's pull requests or conversations starting on all of them. So that's a good place to be. Is there anything in this list that needs some discussion? Needs some focus on one of these calls?
I think we should talk about the first one, but it's in the context of the 0.29 release. So we don't have to do it now, but we could.
Why don't we do it now, Pete?
So yeah, this is a bug that we identified kind of after the release was put out there. And I'm wondering if it's serious enough that we should consider putting out a refresh to fix it. We do have a fix, although it hasn't been completely verified yet, but I'm hoping that'll happen soon. There's two ways to fix it. One is to back out the problematic change, and the other one is we have a fix that keeps the change, supposed to resolve the problem. So basically, if you get a stack trace, instead of getting the class name, it could show unknown class in the stack trace, which doesn't help you figure out what's going on.
How often does this occur? Is this, every stack trace, or is there some way to characterize how frequently this occurs?
It occurs for every hidden or anonymous class that appears in a stack trace. So if you're using lambdas, it'll show up.
Yeah, I can see how that would be annoying, particularly once your lambdas have been passed through into a deep enough set of stream APIs, it'll be hard to tell what's happening or where the cause of an exception is.
And it was also the cause of an internal problem to IBM. I'm not sure exactly why it caused the problem, or like if it was trying to parse a stack trace or something else went wrong. But I don't know if Toby, if you have more insight, but I wonder if this could be causing other problems than just the unknown class in the stack trace.
Toby, is there any other details you want to share on that?
I'm not familiar with any other issues, but I can't see that any API that requires the declared class name to not be null in the stack trace element. If there's any API that relies on this, there will be problems. The only issues I've seen so far are just unknown class names in stack traces.
Yeah, there were some tests that failed, and you had no idea why it was failing. The failure didn't seem related to this unknown class problem at all, but backing out the problematic change fixed it. So probably Toby's right. It might have been depending on getting the declaring class, and it came back null, and that caused the problem. So we don't know what sorts of problems that's going to cause.
That's always been an option, though, that you can get unknown class if the particular class has been unloaded between the stack trace generation and the converting it to a string.
Right. It's not that we got a null pointer exception. There was some other error, and you didn't know why that error was occurring. So there probably code that assumes classes aren't going to be null because they haven't been unloaded. And then if something goes wrong because it can't get the class it expects to see. I'm just saying there could be downstream side effects of this problem. Unknown what they might be.
How far from being ready to release? Let me backtrack actually. Do we have any other known issues with the 0.29 release?
There's two other things I added to the 0.29 milestone plan just so we could easily see what they are.
Skip down to that.
So there was this Stack Overflow error that showed up a couple times, but then I haven't seen it since. So when I saw it a couple times in a row, I thought it might be important, but now that I haven't seen it since, I'm thinking it's less important. And then there's the security 4 failure that happens on Power 10, which of course is specific to Power 10.
Can you characterize the security 4 failure?
You'd have to open it and take a look.
Yeah, I don't know enough about these tests to be able to know what I'm looking at from this.
Yeah, there's no analysis of the problem yet. It's just something that I thought could be important in the future, so I stuck it in there so we didn't lose track of it.
So otherwise we have 8 and 11 out for quarter until the next one will be picked up. Where are others at on this? Are you proposing this, Pete, because you believe it's that we should do the respin?
I'm just thinking that users might start seeing this unknown class problem and not be happy about it, but maybe not. Maybe it's only a problem if you have other issues. I haven't seen it reported by a user yet. No comments by a user. Could just be something to keep an eye on.
It certainly seems like something we hesitant to go too long with this kind of invalid stack traces floating around. Frustration for users.
I know long ago we talked about doing monthly updates, and because Adopt OpenJDK was shut down and moved to Adoptium, we kind of put that aside for a while. But it might be something to pick up again. Consider doing a November update for 0.29. Not taking the latest, but just any fixes that seem important to the 0.29 release.
Would IBM be, considering our only builds are coming from IBM, in some ways we would need to know if IBM's ready to be able to release monthly releases to know if that's something we want to take on as a project.
Who do we have on the call? Anybody?
How will that affect milestone builds? Would it just be complete extra, or would we remove something else? I guess if you're saying this is just going to be patches to the previous release, then I guess it would be just completely new build, right?
Completely new build. We don't have any milestone builds scheduled for November, really. I'm proposing one very end of November, start of December.
That's for 030 M1, right?
Correct.
I
I
think
don't think it's something we have to decide today. It's something that we could discuss with people in IBM and keep collecting issues we think might be important to put into a refresh and decide in a couple of weeks.
that works for me. I'll take a note into the agenda to revisit should we refresh this.
So if we were to do one for October update, what would be like our target, like mid-November, end of November, third week?
Yeah, we don't have any schedule right now. Depend on the severity of the problems found and how urgent it seems to get something new out there and what IBM can accommodate.
So it could just be a case of we'll do these if they're needed and when they're needed,
Yeah, there's
rather than
no point in putting something out,
Right.
a monthly update out if we don't have any fixes to put in.
Okay.
I know sometimes we put a release out and a few things come in a week or two later. And it maybe November's too soon. Maybe it doesn't work because of December holidays. But if issues came in and within the next couple of weeks, we might not have time to resolve them to get something out in November.
Yeah, I think we need an update from whatever internal IBM discussions you need to have around this to see whether we're looking at this as a one-off or looking at this as a ongoing process.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking it may not be a one-off because Mark proposed it in the past. But maybe it's less important now. Maybe hopefully we're more stable and not as important to have monthly updates. I'm not sure. There's always
it would
problems.
be good to find out whether the stakeholders for that were still interested in monthly updates, if there's people available to produce that, and all the other pieces that go into that. Times have changed a bit since then, so. Makes sense to follow up on this on the next call.
Sounds good.
That does bring us then to the 029.1 release. So if I pull up the milestone plan for that, I see we have 10 items in here. Do we have a tighter timeline yet for when we see the release being ready to go?
So I think the short summary is one of the blockers is fixed, but the fix is still going through OMR acceptance and hasn't been double delivered yet. The unexpected exit from test blocker is resolved by a command line option, we think, related to JIT scratch memory. So I don't think the JIT team is ready to make that option the default. So what we could do is ignore the intermittent failure and deliver, remove the blocker label and ship with the problem. Or if we want to make sure we have green tests all the time, we could see about separating that particular test from the rest of the Java util tests and run it with the option all the time.
Do we know sounds like we know what the issue is. what does the particular JIT option do?
So the problem with this test is that it is it's very resource intensive in terms of consuming a lot of JIT resources for inlining. It is somewhat pathological in that it contains a lot of var handles and lambda forms one after another to the point where we're really exhausting our we're exhausting our limits for inlining in that. So we have to do inlining to get any sort of performance out of this. But this method is somewhat unusual in that there's a lot of straight line code that just happens to have one var handle after another that's blowing our budget. So the option basically allows us when we detect method handles or var handles in a method to increase the scratch space. We've tried doing that by default, but we do regress in some places. Not sure why yet, but one of the reasons could be that we are spending a lot of time compiling some methods, which may happen, and we need to get to the bottom of limiting that in some way. For 0.30, we are looking at continuing to improve performance for method handles and var handles and lambda forms. So this could just very well be part of that investigation.
Sorry, just to make sure I understand, is the test exiting, so we're crashing in some way, or we're running out of memory?
We are running out of memory, yes.
Native memory, or throwing an out of memory exception?
Yeah, it's native memory. It's memory consumed by the JIT during the compilation.
So the belief is that this is a particularly unusual unusual case. Have we done anything to validate that assumption?
I've looked at the code of the test and the log of the failing method. I mean, from what we've seen so far, we don't normally have, 78 into the 70s calls to lambda form methods, each of which requires some fairly deep inlining in order to get any performance out of. We run up we end up attempting to inline about 500 methods before we give up. So in my mind, this is an unusual case.
Do we know is 78 the limit that's tipping us over? Is it something?
That's just what the test contains.
So we know that 78 is too big. Do we have an idea? Like, do we blow up at 20? Blow up at 50? Do we blow? That's the piece I don't understand yet. Are we talking about something that's very unusual because it's 78, or just 78 happens to be the test that we're running that trips us over, and we trip over at 25?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a smaller number that we would also trip over. I know that there have been other methods that, probably less than 25 lambda form methods where we do just fine. I think it really depends on the circumstance as well, like what else is in the method that you're compiling, because it's not just, the calls to lambda forms that consume internal JIT memory. There's everything else in the method as well, and things that may appear when we inline those. So it really depends on the overall. It's not just one simple thing that you can check for, I don't think. It's a number of things that are all contributing to the out of memory. What makes it worse in this case is that there just happens to be 78 of these lambda form methods that all require inlining.
Okay, and so if somebody hit this in the field, we have an option that we expect should reduce the problem or should address the
We
issue.
have a means of trying to work around it, yes.
Basically, we can control how much memory to give to the JIT.
I think how the test is failing is it's getting killed by the OS with a signal 9 because the OS is out of memory.
I was wondering maybe you could do something else. So normal compilations use up to 256 megabyte, and method handle compilation require, or not require, but are allowed to consume 1.5 gigabyte of memory. And Daryl tried Nashorn with a limit of 256 for method handlers, and that regressed performance. But is there a better limit in between? So maybe 256 is too little, 1.5 is too much. What if we put, I don't know, 512 or 1 gigabyte? Would that eliminate the performance regression, and we'll be happy making that change as default?
Shouldn't the limit be related to the amount of memory we have on the machine? I think that's the problem, is we're using more memory than the machine's able to give us.
And we do, but it's not perfect. So the JIT tries to monitor how much memory is still available on the OS and not exceed that amount. But there are holes in that logic in the sense that by the time you compute it, somebody else on the machine could have consumed more memory, and you draw the wrong conclusion. And I believe we do only these calculations every half a second or so. So if in between these half a second computation somebody else consume more memory, then we could go overboard for the entire system.
But it sounded like there's hard-coded limits to the memory that will allow. Shouldn't those limits be based on?
They are. So these are they are hard limits, but internally, when a compilation starts, we read how much memory is available on the system and set a limit to adjust for that decrease in memory.
So the limits you mentioned are a maximum.
Yes.
And assuming that the machine has that amount of memory at the time that we start the compile.
Yeah.
Given where we are in the 17 release, I think it makes sense to probably remove the blocker label from that, especially given the fact that we can work around this with command line options if necessary.
I agree with that.
And maybe Toby could talk about the last one.
So the number 13162, we're seeing a null pointer exception, an entry to an invoke special. The whole scenario doesn't really make sense. The receiver is created by a new bytecode, so if it were null, we would have thrown a heap out of memory exception. This is a case where we need more diagnostics to understand what's going on. The issue is that the reproducibility is very difficult, and it becomes more difficult the more diagnostic information we try to acquire. That's why it's taken so long to resolve this issue. So I think it's definitely something we can fix, but it might take some time. It doesn't appear to be very frequent. So I'm wondering if it still requires the blocker label.
Yeah, so I'm just looking through. It seemed it was frequent enough. That's why the blocker was added. The last occurrence was 7 days ago, and before that, 8 days ago, 14 days ago, 20 days ago. So it does seems it still happens, unless one of the recent fixes has helped.
Are we missing some memory barriers?
I
Something
would
that's been created correctly and now suddenly is throwing null pointer exceptions. I'm assuming when we dump a core on the exception being thrown, everything looks right. Is that correct?
No, we actually see that the slot is null. So at the time of the invoke special, it definitely is null. After that point, it's hard because the stack trace, the throw exception path pops all the relevant stack slots. So we've had to basically trigger core right inside the invoke special bytecode. I'd be surprised if we were missing a barrier, just because we're talking about we're not talking about anything complicated here. It's just a bunch of new get field, A loads, and invoke special bytecodes. So it's just fairly conventional sequence that's happening.
Okay. And you're saying when the core is generated, we do see the null in whatever we've read from?
Yeah.
Sounds to me like this one needs more investigation. I'd be hesitant to ship this.
Doesn't seem to be limited to a particular test. I've seen at least 3 different tests being hit by this.
Toby, could we add a check after whatever's creating this that validates that that field is not null? And even release that into the stream if necessary, so that we assert and generate a core right away. If that field is null, that'll help us start to narrow down. Is this issue being caused by the normal construction paths, or is it being overwritten later?
Well, so the way, I think if you scroll up a bit further, you can see the bytecode sequence that I'm trying to describe. Right here, yeah. So the thing that's null is I guess it's the first 2 bytecodes. So we do a new to create the intrinsic method handle, and then we do a dupe. The dupe is what's going to go into the invoke special. And so the dupe is basically a copy. I don't expect any strange behavior from that. And that's basically the slot that is null. So we already have a check for new if we attempt to create something and we can't, then we throw out of memory. So if it's null, something must have happened after the fact. But looking at this bytecode sequence, there's nothing there that would overwrite that slot. So the whole thing is a bit strange.
So we do a new, we do a dupe. The invoke static consumes the dupe and the 2 A loads, leaving The new, another A load. And it's the new that is causing the, that is null when we hit the invoke special?
So I believe the invoke static consumes a load 0 and a load 1 above. I think there's only 2 parameters for that.
Yep, sorry.
And so when we do the invoke special, we have the dupe, the thing that was, duplicated, and then we have the a load. We have the a load 2, the result of the invoke static and the a load 2. And so the receiver for that invoke special is null.
Yeah, that speaks to some. And you're saying that the new and the dupe have different values. One is null and one is not? Both null.
Both are null is what we were seeing. In the last core I saw, I did notice some other stack corruption. So that's my guess, is that we have some kind of corruption going on by an operation that occurs before the invoke special. The thing that's triggering the failure is the null, the NPE.
Yeah, if something else is corrupting our stack, we certainly need to get to the bottom of this before we're shipping. I agree that I don't see how that bytecode sequence can generate a null on its own, which makes this even scarier in that means we've got corruption going on somewhere.
Yeah, okay, so we'll double the effort here, since it seems like this is the last blocker on the list. And we'll do whatever we can to close it out.
Okay. Thanks, Toby. All right, so I guess that's determining our release date then at this point. Cognizant that we're over time, but if we take a look at the 0:30 dates, Pete, I see you've proposed some timelines.
Yeah, branching at the end of November, doing an M1 after that, and then doing an M2 around December 15th, which I think is okay.
And yeah, that seems reasonable, assuming that all the necessary people will be around to get the M2 out.
We did talk about doing an M1 for 029.1, maybe starting it yesterday, but I thought we should wait for that fix that has been merged in OMR for it to be accepted and backported. So maybe we could start an M1 for 029.1 tomorrow.
That works for me. Adam or whoever on your side, are they lined up to be able to do that?
Yep, that's fine.
Is there anything else in the general business section that we should tackle today? Otherwise, I'll just sort of scroll through, and if there's something that needs to be discussed, chime in.
We have 2 more minutes. I'll just mention the sensitive terms that IBM doesn't want to see being used. I fixed a couple. I know we fixed a bunch a year or more ago, but I've found a few more and I fixed them One thing they're saying needs to be changed is a sanity test or sanity check. So we could suggest, I'm not sure how many people from Adoptium are on the call, but we could suggest we rename the sanity suite to something else, like the validate suite.
It might make sense to go with a tiering level rather than naming them, tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, or
Yep, that's also fine with me.
Are we close to changing the default branch names as well as part of this exercise?
That is in plan. I think GitHub allows you to change the master branch to something else, but GitHub Enterprise isn't ready to do that yet. So once GitHub Enterprise is ready to do that, then we'll go ahead and make that change.
Well, there's no need to wait for any particular feature of GitHub Enterprise. You can create a new branch called main, for example, find it where you want it, and just stop using the old branch name, set the new one to be the default branch.
We could. I didn't look at it, but my understanding is there's something that GitHub provides that we're expecting to show up in GitHub Enterprise at a later time.
Yeah, you just click on a thing and say rename the branch. But
Yeah.
that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of scripts and so on that use the name of the current branch that will have to be updated for the new branch name.
Yep. So it's something that we should do. It's not something that we need to do this year.
sounds like we need that to be on Adam's on Adam's radar, so that we're starting to get those scripts updated and any sync scripts and the like.
I mean, we could arrange to have both the new and the old branch names, and have some automation that keeps them pointing the same place, so that the scripts can get updated gradually.
I think we'd be better off to.
We may or may not need that. Maybe we should just take like an inventory first and see how much needs to be done. And whether we would need to have some kind of dual branch process or if we can just switch over them like in one day or something like that.
Sounds like a good approach, Adam. Certainly cleaner than trying to grow some automation between the two.
Yeah, I don't think we have a lot of places that refer to master. There are some for sure, but not hundreds.
Guess
There'll
we'll
be
find out.
stuff at Adoptium too that is going to refer to the default branch names. Well, they may be broken for a while if we don't keep them in mind.
Right.
Will they?
Pete, are you
Because
gonna?
pulling the extensions, and the extensions has the branch name for OpenJ9. It might not affect them.
I'd like to see the default branch change for the extension repos as well.
Well, we're using OpenJ9 branch, right? So
Yeah, it's an OpenJ9 branch, so I think adopt will be okay because it's using an alternate one anyway.
No, but there's OMR has a.
Yes, but I think that's all encoded in the get thingy script, isn't it?
get sources.
That's it, yeah.
Okay, but just those branch names should go, even if they're not the default branch names.
Right. Agreed.
For the extensions ones, would we not wait for OpenJK to change, or would we call our
We don't need to wait for them.
Okay.
We just need to change our mirroring script to bring over the changes and put them in another branch other than master.
Okay.
I don't think it's a hard change.
Okay.
But does somebody feel like we need to get on this right away, or?
Well, I mean, was there something that happened that kind of brought this back to the surface and motivated the recent PRs?
there's something that happened within IBM. Yes, there was
Okay.
a talk about the sensitive terms, and IBM has some deadlines for getting rid of them. So the IBM deadline for getting rid of master is June 30th, 2022.
We got some time yet, but I don't see there's any value in waiting.
I think it would depend on how busy Adam and other people are doing other things when they think it's a good time to do it. And if we're busy trying to get releases out, we don't want all our infrastructure to be broken for too long.
No.
Pete, so the one question about the testing branch names, are you going to follow up with Shelley and the Adopt company around, or the Adopt group around that?
Lan has already talked to Shelley about it. I was hoping Shelley would be on the call. I'm just mentioning it so everyone's aware.
Okay.
I don't think we have
I hadn't heard that one, but I'll discuss it with Shelley as well.
Yeah, I don't think we have Lan or Shelley on the call today. So
I think Shelley's doing a conference presentation at the moment. So not sure about Lan.
All right. Is there anything else that we need to cover today?
Do we know when we can expect images for Docker for 0.29 release? I don't think they're there yet.
Should be this week. I think we're in progress of updating the Docker files.
Okay, thanks.
And thank you, everybody, and we'll have the next one of these calls next week.
thank you.